Hello everyone, my name is Ronak and you're watching VectoArt. In today's video, we will talk about radio buttons in WinUI 3. A radio button, also called option buttons, lets users select one option from a collection of two or more mutually exclusive but related options. Radio buttons are always used in groups and each option is represented by one radio button in the group. In the default state, no radio button is a radio buttons group is selected. That is, all radio buttons are cleared. However, once a user has selected a radio button, the user can deselect a button to restore the group to its initial cleared state. The singular behavior of radio buttons group distinguishes it from checkboxes, which supports multiple selections and deselections or clearing. So the WinUI 3 Gallery app includes interactive examples of most WinUI 3 controls, features, and functionality. You can get this app from the Microsoft Store or get the source code from GitHub. You can also check out my previous video where I have talked about all the usage of this gallery and how you can make use of the tips and tricks that are provided in this gallery and how it helps us in using the controls and gives you an insight of the types of controls provided by WinUI 3. So moving ahead, let's launch Visual Studio and create a new project. And let's select WinUI 3 desktop application. If you do not see the templates, please check out my video on how to get started with WinUI 3. I'll leave a link in the description. So I will select this from it is also there in my recent templates, and click on next. Give this project a name and click on create. So the while it is loading, the radio button control uses a content model similar to an items control. This means that you can populate it by adding items directly to the items collection or by binding data to its item source property. Uh, you can use the selected index or selected item properties to get and set which option is selected. Handle the selection changed event to take action when an option is chosen. So we will talk about all of these options for the radio button. And here, let's start by going to the main window, and let's run the application first and see if there are any errors. So here you can see our window has loaded and we have a boilerplate code that populates a small button which on click displays the or changes the button text to clicked. And here on the right hand side you will see the XAML live preview which will um, show you kind of a designer, or you can minimize this, or you can go back to your window and make changes to the designer here or the XAML, and that will immediately reflect on the live preview. Since WinUI 3 does not support a designer yet, this is the most effective way to see your changes to the XAML in real time. So now that the application is working perfectly, let me start by declaring a simple radio button control with three options. So let's start by adding a radio button. Uh, there are two controls. One is the radio button and the next one is the radio buttons. So let me talk first about the differences between the two. So there are two ways to create radio button groups: radio buttons and radio button. We recommend the radio buttons control. This control simplifies layout, handles keyboard navigations and accessibility, and supports binding to the data source. You can use groups of individual radio button controls also. The keyboard access and navigation behavior have been optimized in the radio buttons control. These improvements help both accessibility and keyboard power users move through the list of options more quickly and easily. So all these keyboard navigation shortcuts will be much easier in the radio buttons control. So this is why I also recommend you to use radio buttons and not the radio button. Now moving ahead, let's go back and design our radio buttons control here. So I will add a header The header property is to set or give this a label. So let me say background color, and let's set the selected index to 0. By doing this, it will select the first item in the list or in the set of items in the radio button. And next we'll set the selected index, selected changed event handler, and set it to a new event handler. And then let me close this radio button, and within our radio buttons let me add some item of type string. And let's say red. Let me copy this and blue. So we have our radio button, and I want to make a small change to this. So let me change this radio buttons to radio button color, selected index changed. And let me go back to our window here, and let me delete this button click, which was the boilerplate code for the button that was at the center. Let me change this name of the uh, event handler to background color underscore selected index change. And within our selected index change, I will write some code. So if, and before that, I will also add a border. So let's say border, uh, and give it a name because I want to reference it in the code behind. And let me call it example border. And let's set the width of 100 points and height of 100 points. And let's close this. Okay, and we have our border set. Now let's if our example border. Let me stop the application and copy this. If the example border is not equal to null and sender is radio buttons are B, then string equal to B dot. Here we will use the selected item of the radio button. Once the radio button selected index is changed, we'll take the selected item as string and assign it to our variable color name. Next, we will use the switch control and switch using our color name. And the first case is red. If the selected value is red, then the example, I had to put a semicolon here, a colon here, and then example border dot background equal to new solid color brush. And in this, let's set color start red. I think we need to add the namespace for me to use this, and then break. So let's copy this code and paste it 2 more times for the color red, blue and green. Let's set the color here and blue. Yeah, I think that is all. Let's save this and let's run our application. So right now the selected color, because I have set the selected index as 0, has automatically triggered the selected selection changed. By default, the selected index is set to -1, and since the selected index is set to 0, and when the program loads, it calls the selected index changed, and our backend code for selected changed is invoked, and it sets the background color of our border to red. If I changed it to green, the code reacts as it is programmed. So the selection states, a radio button has two states, selected or cleared. When an option is selected in a radio buttons group, you can get its value from the selected item like we are doing here, and property, and its location in the collection from the selected index property. A radio button can be cleared if a user selects another radio button in the same group, but it can't be cleared if the user selects it again. So for example, if I cannot clear this, but if I select another radio button, the item will be cleared. However, you can clear a radio button group programmatically by setting its selected item to null or the selected index to -1. So next, let's talk about the radio button content. In this example, we populated the radio button control with simple strings over here. So next, we will talk about the other content options for the radio buttons. So let me stop running this application, and instead of strings, I will use a different approach where I will now let's me go back and change the header here. Select an icon option, and let's remove all of the selected index and all of the data that we added. And here let's add a symbol icon, and let's say symbol of back. So you can use symbol icons provided by WinUI. So this come in very handy when you need icons for your applications. So these are built in, so make use of these. Attach, let's say hang up, and then the last one, let's say full screen. So these are some of the items. Let me go back here and comment this out and run the application. So here you can see we have our radio button with icons, symbol icons as the content of the radio button, and you can see how good these icons look. So please do check out these and make use of them. Next, we'll talk about data binding. The radio buttons control supports data binding to its item source property. In our next example, we will show how we can use the control, or we can bind the control to a custom data source. The appearance and functionality of this example that we are going to demonstrate is same as the previous background color theme example, but the color brushes are stored in a data model instead of directly programming it in the backend. So let's start. I will uh, revert my changes and go back to the main window and do the same by reverting back to the background color example that we did. So now we have our header control radio button with the background color value. Then we have our selected index set to 0. We have the selection changed background color selected changed event handler. And the next thing that we want is our item source. And I will bind it to color option items. Right now this is not available, and we will do that in a minute. We'll add this to our data model. And let me close this. Okay, so we have our radio button ready. Now let's go back to our main window, code behind. And first we will start by adding a class. Let's say custom data item. And in this, let's say public class color option data model. And within this class, we will have two properties of like string label, get set, and the next property is public solid color brush, and the getters and setters. So now our properties are set. Next, create our constructor. Sorry, we need to override the toString property. So let's say public override string toString and return the label, and finally close our class. Next, we need a list of type color option data model, and let's call it um, the same name that we provided over here, which we will bind to. Okay, so our list of type color option data model is created. Now in our main page, main window, let's use this color option items list and populate it with the color option data model values. We have created an instance of it, and now we will use this to add items. And within this, let's add a set the property of label equal to red, and the color brush equal to new solid color brush, and set the value that we have here. Let's say do this and set it to red. So we have our first button and first color ready. Close this and close our so similarly let's add the other two colors that we have, and the one is green, the last one is blue. Finally, we need the selection changed event handler, and here let's remove this code that we had earlier, and here we will create a variable called option and get the event handler e dot add items of 0 as color option data model, and then set our border dot background equal to options dot color brush, and let's save this and go back to our main window and run the application. So here when I change the radio button, you can see it is working as expected and getting the data from item source from our color options data model that we created, which has these two properties, label and color brush, and we are setting the label and color brush in when we are initializing our window. Within that, we are creating new items of type list color option data model and setting these properties for the label and the color brush. So this is how we have set the radio button with an data model. And Next, we can talk about defining multiple columns. So by default, the radio button control arranges its radio buttons vertically in a single column, like you see here. You can set max column property to make the control arrange radio buttons in multiple columns. When you do this, they are laid out in column major order, where items fill in from top to bottom, when then left to right. So let's stop this application. Let me comment out these code which I have added here in the backend. Uh, Comment out this and also the data model. Uh, Let me go back to our main window, and within our radio button, let's change this header. I think I don't need this border anymore. Let's comment that out to change the radio buttons in columns. And let's remove the selected index. We don't need that. Max columns is the property that we are talking about here, and let me set it to 3 and get rid of the selection index change and the item source. I don't need it for this demonstration. And let me close our radio button. And within our radio buttons, let's add some items of type string. And close this and say item 1. And let me repeat this several times. Let me call this 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. Now if I save and run this application, you will see that you will see 3 columns, and the items that I have in my radio button items list will be split into 3 columns evenly. So here you can see we have item 1, 2, 3, and if you see the keyboard navigations now, if I press tab, the item switches down and then moves to the next item in an order. So we can create our own radio button group. In this example, we talked about mostly the radio buttons, which is the recommended one, but we can also use radio button. So we can also group them. So there are 2 ways to group them. One is to use this radio button, and we do not have this values over here. We have the content for the radio button. So radio button content, let's set this to say red and remove this max. And let's say this is our radio button, and close this and copy this several times. And let's change this to green, blue, yellow, black. And when I run this, since they are enclosed within a stack panel, the radio buttons that are all within the stack panel will be grouped together. And you will soon see how. So here we have a radio button, and you can see they act as if they are in a group and not individual. Or you can implicitly and you can also group them using the group name and RB. And in this way, you can provide the same group for grouping the radio buttons into a group. So in this way, you can group the radio button control. And if you want the groupings and keyboard navigations and other accessibility features, then you go for the radio buttons control, which is the recommended button from Microsoft and also me. So hope you all liked watching this video. If you do, please give this video a thumbs up, like, share, and do subscribe to my channel. Till then, bye bye.